that you can drag and drop as needed. So we're so excited about the speakers that we have here today and the conversation that we are going to kick off. I'll just quickly introduce each of our speakers, and then I'm going to pass it off to them to let them introduce themselves and their businesses, their companies, and what their product what their products look like. So we have Camille Esposito, who's a senior brand designer from Webflow. We also have Alan Yu, a product manager at Airtable. And we have Lisa Smith, an engineering manager at Zapier. So Camille, I'd like to pass it off to you and tell us more about Webflow.
Yeah, thanks. Nice to meet you, everybody. I'm Camille. So do we have a slide? Are we going to show the Webflow slide, or should I just talk about it? Oh, here it comes. Okay, cool. So Webflow is a tool that lets you design, build, and launch websites without writing code. So as you can see, the designer interface of Webflow sort of abstracts and gives a visual representation of concepts that you would normally write with HTML, CSS, and jQuery, but presents it in a visual way in a GUI, a graphical user interface. So you can build pretty robust websites with Webflow, like as robust as you would write with code, but without having to know how to write code and without having to spend the time writing that code.
Thank you so much. And Alan?
Yeah, hey everyone. Alan, excited to be here and great to meet you all. Airtable is really kind of a no-code, low-code software development platform. It is designed to be kind of as intuitive and easy as a spreadsheet, but under the hood is a fully relational database. And we offer a lot of different ways to view the same data, so your whole team can share the same single source of truth, but everybody can work off of a different subset of the data, work in the particular view that they prefer to work in the best. And we've seen it used from personal use cases all the way up to large scale enterprise use cases. And really it's a way to build more robust business processes without having to rely on an IT team or an engineering team to build the software for you.
Thank you, Alan. And Lisa.
Hello, friends. I'm Lisa Smith. I'm an engineering manager at Zapier. I use she, her pronouns. Zapier is a workflow automation tool that allows you to connect any two apps and have them work together in concert, with the parts being a trigger. When a thing happens in the first app, do this thing in the second app. And the trigger and the action make up a zap. And you can build custom zaps. We have zap templates that you can, for a commonly used thing, you can see some examples here, connecting Gmail and Slack, connecting your GCal and Slack. Pretty much any app you want and any other app can be connected with a template, but then you can also build highly custom multi-step zaps as well. And we have a program for companies so that you can share zaps with your coworkers. It's super helpful, and you can use a single sign-on authentication and can consolidate all of the zaps that your team uses, so you can share them together, and everyone can even more efficiently use automation workflows, because one person can build them and a bunch of people can use them. And we are proud to be part of the no-code revolution, but you can also build even more complex integrations. If you are a software owner, if you're an app owner, you can come in and build on our developer platform. That's a small plug because that's my team. And that's that here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I am excited to hear more about these companies and their products as we go, but to kick us off into the learning more about no code and low code, it would be great to hear from our speakers about their personal journey into this space. So if we could start with Camille, we would love to hear about how you learned about this no code, low code movement and how you found yourself working here. So I'll pass it off to Camille.
Yeah, thanks, Dee. So I got into no code through Webflow. I started using it about 5 years ago. I don't remember exactly what brought me to it, but at the time I was working at a small design agency of 5 people, who hired me because I could like write very basic code, and had a little bit more focus on web design than some of the other designers there. It was like a pretty traditional agency that focused on a lot of print work. And at the time, they still sent off like PSD files of their web designs to developers, usually through WordPress. And so I switched us over to Webflow so that we could actually build the websites that we were designing at the studio, which saved us time, saved us money, and just gave us more control over the designs. And also made it easier for us to edit those pages because, because we were doing it in-house. So I was the one designing and building the websites. They always used to joke that like Webflow must be paying me because of how much I pitched it, which they are now, but they weren't then. So after that agency, I went to work at GetAround, which is a startup, a peer-to-peer car sharing startup. And when I joined, they actually were about to migrate their marketing website into Webflow. They had, a fairly small team of developers who were focused on the app, which makes sense, but which meant that the marketing website of GetAround was not updated for like 4 years. And so I worked on that migration to Webflow, which was not exactly a migration, just like redesigning and rebuilding the marketing website in Webflow so that the marketing team and the design team could own all of that content and all of that development without getting in the queue of development tasks and without disrupting their priorities, because working on the app is higher priority and is a more logical use of their time and effort. And so when I was at GetAround, actually about a year ago exactly, I think, I spoke at Webflow's no-code conference about that migration, GetAround's website migration into Webflow, and started talking to people at Webflow and then got hired there a few months later.
That is a great story. What an ambassador you've been at these different places. I love to hear that. Thank you so much. And Alan, we'd love to hear about your journey as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I have a bit of a non-traditional path into product management, I guess. Don't have formal training in computer science outside of, I guess I took one intro CS class in college, but, I've spent time as an environmental consultant, and then I was a graduate student in the physical sciences. And then I kind of forayed into tech as a data scientist, and finally now I'm a product manager. I think by nature, I'm very kind of like process and efficiency minded. So in all those roles, I spent a fair amount of time building internal tools. So, as data scientists, building dashboards, as an environmental consultant, building tools to help track and analyze a lot of our data, with the intent of basically helping teams move faster and get more done. Saw that, it could be really powerful, but also felt like the process of building those tools was really repetitive and painful. Throughout all those different jobs, 90% of the work was kind of the same. It was setting up some infrastructure, setting up a database, modeling the data the right way, wiring the UI to talk to the database to be able to read and write data. So at some point discovered Airtable, got really excited about the vision. The vision is to kind of solve that 90% of the grunt work for you and let you focus on the kind of 10% that's interesting, which is what are your team's specific needs and how do you solve those? So yeah, that's kind of been my journey so far. That's how I ended up at Airtable, and really excited to see where it leads.
Thank you so much, Alan. I'm a huge fan of Airtable, and I just today signed up for my Airtable account through work. I was very excited. So thank you so much for sharing about that. We're looking forward to hearing more about it. And Lisa, tell us about how you came into the no-code, low-code world.
Absolutely. And just, full disclosure, Dee Dee and I have worked together in the past, and she is a co-director with me of Women Who Code, which is actually how I came to know Zapier. One of our, I think maybe our first presentation after we launched was a work-life balance presentation given by somebody who worked at Zapier. So that was the first I heard of them. And Zapier's been 100% remote since founding. So that was super appealing just to hear about how they worked. But I started using Zapier personally after I became an engineering manager. It helped me automate a lot of tasks that I was doing over and over again, which is the key to loving Zapier. If you do a thing twice, you should build an automation for it and stop doing it anymore. My primary use case was changing my Slack status to match what I was in meetings, because the company I was at, we would do 3 days a week remote and 2 days in the office. And so that was before Slack had any workflow integrations of its own, and Zaps got done what I needed to get done there, which was tell everybody where I am whenever I'm someplace new. And so that got me hooked, and I started doing lots of stuff with it. I've got a bunch of Zaps now. Of course, now that I work for Zapier, we have tons of Zaps that we all share amongst each other, but my favorites include being able to add a React to something and it will go into my to-do list. And also being able to set up meeting agendas after I set up something in Google Calendar, to set up a predefined meeting agenda for it, so that I always have a doc ready to go. And those are just a few of the wonderful Zaps that you can find shared templates for on the website. And come join us over here in the low code, no code revolution. I have the privilege at Zapier of directing the developer platform team. And so we build the platform that both our internal team uses to build strategic apps and integrations for Zapier, as well as anybody who wants to. So I get to have the fun of watching brand new integrations pop up and helping those get approved and move through the process, as well as supporting developers internally and externally use our products at that next level.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And actually, that sort of leads into the next thing that I would love to hear you all talk about, and that is who your users are. So we've described a lot of different products here, and I would love to hear from you who you think is using your products, and some of those use cases. So we just heard a little bit of that from Lisa, and I'm going to give her a break and let her think of how to answer this question maybe from a different angle, and we'll go back to Camille and hear about who she really feels like are those users of Webflow and what they look like.
Yeah, so our customers are sort of split between people who build websites for a living, so people who work at agencies and freelance designers, and then in-house team. So that's like the use case of me at GetAround, and our team building and designing and building the website in Webflow. And then within those buckets, there's a range of like independent freelancers and studios to full-scale agencies, and then some bigger companies that use Webflow either for prototyping or for their actual website. And so that's sort of one of the really exciting things about no code, is what it enables for people who, you no longer need to know how to code and have access to the money to go to a boot camp, the time to learn to code, and all of the other barriers of entering tech kind of early on. There is still a learning curve, but the goal is for that learning curve to be less steep, a lot easier, so that people who otherwise are not represented in tech and don't have that background and aren't as technical can build products and websites themselves. So some use cases could be like entrepreneurs starting their own company. Without no code, the option sort of would be learn to code, hire a developer, which obviously costs a lot of money, or kind of scrap something together with like tools that are, technically low code, but maybe not as robust. And so with something like Webflow, they can, follow our educational tutorials, use our templates, and make their own website for their own product, or make the MVP and just like get their idea out there sooner. And it also just enables a more diverse range of people to create for the web than who is currently or historically creating for the web.
Thank you. I love that. So you've really described a wide variety of people, folks who currently work in tech, folks who have ideas about tech or even want to start a tech company. So that is exciting to hear about that. And Alan, who would you say are your primary users for Airtable?
Yeah, we're really focused on empowering creators, as we call them, and creators are people who feel like their team or business process could be more effective, and then are motivated to kind of explore and figure out if there's something better that they can build. So it could be that you're tired of wrangling hundreds of spreadsheets that are all out of sync, or maybe your company is trying to digitize a physical process, or maybe you're using some like legacy software that's clunky and just hasn't kept up with how your business has changed over the years. And I think it's less about a specific use case or vertical. And actually, the thing we're excited about is that there are creators everywhere, both in personal use cases as well as in almost every business out there. So whether you are just using Airtable as a personal to-do list, or for your small business, or you're at Netflix and you manage the production pipeline for every TV show and movie that they're producing, and there are thousands of people you're collaborating with. In either case, we hope that Airtable gives you kind of the power and the flexibility to build the exact workflow that you need for your team. So that's kind of who we're going after there.
I love this word, creators. That is conceptually really fun to think about. Thank you for that. And Lisa, what about Zapier? Who would you say are their primary customers? Who's using Zapier?
Well, we like to think it's everybody that has to do anything on a computer, basically, because what it does is leverage your productivity and be a force multiplier for that. So the strict answer is that mostly small and medium businesses are our primary users, and it's because Zapier essentially adds another staff member for you. You can get a lot more done. One of our corporate values is build the robot, don't be a robot. Again, if you find yourself doing something more than once, you can set up a Zap to take care of that, and then you don't have to think it. It's a nice set it and forget it type situation. But also there's a pretty powerful use case that is one of my favorite examples. It used to be that choosing a CRM package was very fraught and complex, and you had to examine all the trade-offs between the ones that you were looking at. Sometimes cost prohibitive, sometimes it was, you sacrifice this in order to get that. And now you don't have to do that. You pick the CRM that has the features that you like or the interface that you like, and then you add a bunch of zaps around the edges to get all of the features that you might be missing. So you can expand any piece of software that you use by adding a zap to it and making it exactly like you want. It's like getting your own custom suite of software tailored exactly to your workflow. And it's a really powerful use for, especially during COVID times, a lot of people have been able to transition from having, hands-on or intensive situations and adding zaps in to automate stuff so that they could change. Say we had a lot of restaurants change from, obviously in person to being able to set up online ordering and fulfillment and that kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of those use cases that have happened of late. But also everybody, I think, recognizes how, we're working more and differently now that we're all dispersed and working remotely, and Zapier takes some of the pain out of that by setting up some of those flows that you would rely on, coworkers or office mates to do.
Something about the way you described that made me think I should introduce my kids to Zapier. So I am going to put that on my to-do list.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for that. It is really fun to hear you talk about your users and to think about how broadly this can apply or be accessible to folks out there in the world who are trying to get things done. And I would love to go back to something that Camille mentioned, and that is those barriers to entry into roles in technology. And I'd love to talk a little bit about how this space, this low code, no code approach kind of lowers those barriers and really empowers people to do amazing things. So I would love to hear each of your thoughts about that, and just feel free to sort of add to the discussion as something comes to mind. And let's really talk about, does no code, low code mean something in the world of technology as far as diversity and inclusion? And what are your thoughts about that?
I'm happy to start off there. As a huge advocate and putting a lot of energy behind diversity and inclusion, I feel like the low code, no code revolution gives people access to tools that they would otherwise have to spend either a lot of money or a lot of time learning or building, right? So this assembles your own toolkit essentially for free, and you can do a lot of powerful things, and you don't have to have a giant software suite behind you that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that makes it democratizes it. It brings it to everyone. If you've got a computer or a phone that you can connect to the internet, you can use a lot of these tools to get a lot of really sophisticated work done. It used to be that visual builders were looked down upon as being, you know, oh, an amateur's tools, but you can leverage a visual builder to do literally anything now and not have to know all of the code that powers it, really just to get your work done and not have to think about all of the other things around it. So it gives you both the access to tools as well as the freedom to come up with your own workflow that works for you. And it doesn't require you to have a lot of operating like capital or materials. You can just jump right in there and set things up and have it going in a matter of minutes and feel like you're crushing it.
Yeah, just to jump on, I really like the word you used, Lisa, of democratize. That's actually Airtable's mission happens to be to democratize software creation. And I think really what you said resonates. You know, the way we think about it is like the power to create software currently really resides in a tiny fraction of the population. And we don't think that's the way that it should be. Software can be transformative. It's increasingly essential these days. But we don't think you need to have a formal CS or programming background to be able to create it. And yeah, I think we hope that technology can kind of be part of the solution here. And no-code tools really circumvent hopefully some of the underrepresentation we're seeing, because anyone who's kind of even at like an Excel level of technical proficiency should be able to create software. And so that's kind of the vision that we have for Airtable too.
Yeah, I think that the concept of democracy is sort of democratizing access to tech, and creation in tech is the underlying principle of like what defines a no-code tool. And it's sort of akin to like the printing press. Like it's these tools that enable more and more people to create things at a bigger scale who didn't have, without needing certain privileges to do that. There still are privileges needed, but like the goal is to lower to get rid of as many as we can. And especially in Silicon Valley, tech is largely made up of, or sort of developers are sort of a big part of the tech scene, and developers are largely white, middle to upper class men because of a variety of privileges that allow them to get that education and get into those jobs, and also just the overwhelming representation of white men already in that space. So I think, the goal of no-code tools is to provide those tools to people without requiring that technical background. So getting rid of some of those barriers, like paying for a boot camp, time to learn the computer science, or just representation. And kind of the goal output of that is that by diversifying an array of people building for the web, that the products that people are building and that the ideas that people are able to bring to life are also more diverse.
Okay, thank you all so much for talking about that. Something Alan said really jumped out at me. He talked about software as being transformative and increasingly essential. And so as we think about this common theme that you all have mentioned, which is to democratize technology, what are your thoughts about where we are now? Like, are we there? Has low code and no code done this? And if not, what will it take to get us there? What are your thoughts about that?
I don't think we're there, but I think we're on a great path. I think there's way more opportunities now than there ever have been. I mean, just the fact that we're here at speaking together on this topic, I think is an illustration of how many different ways you can jump into the low code, no code world. There's so many different tools. Depending on whatever your focus is or whatever your desire is, you can probably find some tools to work with. But not everybody's doing it yet, because there is still somewhat that like, oh, you're letting somebody else handle it for you. You're not doing it yourself, which is not at all true. You can build super complex products with any of the tools that we're talking about today. It doesn't just have to be my one-step zap that changes my status on my Slack channel, right? Like that's a a very low end example of it, but you can leverage any of these tools to do really powerful stuff. And I think that's great. And we're on the way. And I think the more, honestly, the longer we persist in this state that we're in now, where we all have to adjust and work differently than we had before, I think more people are going to discover these tools and integrate them into their work processes and understand them for the important things that they are, rather than, oh, it's just some, other, another piece of software that I got to think about. I think it's really going to take off a lot more as we continue to redefine where and how work happens. But I definitely don't think we're there yet, but we're on a good track.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think we're never going to like arrive there. Like it's a thing that we are always going to be working towards. I agree that we're on a good track. I mean, there are still barriers of entry. It's still easier to get into no code if you have a technical background, because it's still the same concepts being represented. It still requires internet access and having a computer. And then there's also a lot of no-code products are not accessible to people who are low vision or blind, or people with other disabilities that don't let them use the products are just not entirely designed for those people right now. So yeah, we're absolutely not there in terms of democratizing access for everybody or enabling everyone to create for the web or to create software. But I think there's a lot of things that Webflow and I'm sure other no-code tools are doing on that path. Making sort of looking at ease of use of the product so that people who aren't technical can use it more easily without sacrificing like the robust outputs of the product. That's the challenge. Education also, like getting education in front of people earlier on, like getting no code education in front of people when they're younger, so that is something that's sort of easier to grow into, and then trying to make these products more accessible to everybody. Because if we're saying that it's democratizing access to everybody and that we want to enable everybody to create for the web, like we have to actually look at what everybody means and not just make it a little bit easier for people who are already technical to create for the web.
Yeah, what you said, Camille, about the concepts resonates with me. We see that too, is the learning curve is much lower, but it's still not zero. So that's definitely an area of improvement, both I think from a product and technology standpoint, as well as from an education and community standpoint. Yeah, and I think also agree with what's been said that I think we're really just starting to scratch the surface. I think like any technology, there was some hype about visual builders, but I think the real impact of it and the real growth of it is yet to come. And to some degree, I think it's kind of inevitable. The demand and the power of this is so high. I think that probably in 10 years, we'll be looking back at where we are now and kind of laugh at how early we are in the journey. So I'm really looking forward to see how it grows over time.
That is exciting to think about. Sometimes when you put yourself 10 years in the future, it's hard to imagine, because think about 10 years in the past, and could we have imagined where we are now? I hope our imaginations are up to it, but it is exciting to think about. Thank you for that. So there were a couple of things that you all talked about that got me thinking about folks who are not in this space yet, but who would like to be. So maybe we can discuss a little bit about how someone who's new to no code or low code and maybe has no background in technology, how would they get started? Like, what are some resources that we or others could point them to? Why don't we go to Camille to start this off, and then we'd love to hear any other thoughts from Alan or Lisa as well.
Yeah, so I think there are tool-specific educational materials. So for Webflow, it's Webflow University. So go to the tool that you're interested in and check out their educational resources that they're creating. Like, I think because the mission of a lot of these companies is to enable more and more people to create for the web, it's usually a big part of it to have education and explaining these concepts to people. There's also sort of more general, a lot of resources have come up that are just more generally educational no-code things. So resources like MakerPad, which often includes sort of tutorials or explanations across many no-code tools. So that can be a good place to start if you're not sure exactly which tool is going to work for you, or if you just want to learn about the no-code space in general. MakerPad, Visual Dev School. There's one called no-code&rdquo. There's also a lot of TED Talks about it. And a Google search of no code will yield a lot. It's a lot of people are talking about it and innovating on it now.
Yeah, and I would add, personally, I'm very hands-on. I like to learn by doing, and so that would be my recommendation, is just find a project, whether you need to build a new website or there's some part of your business workflow that you're doing more than once a day and you just want to automate that, as Lisa said, or if you just feel like your team is, you know, losing track of things and you want to build a better sort of workflow. And I think by doing it, that will teach you all the basics. If you get stuck, there are so many great resources out there, from blogs to YouTube channels, community forums, and people will happily help you get unstuck. It's a pretty engaged community from what I've seen, no matter what software you're working with. And then, yeah, I think in addition, you'll pick up some of the theory along the way, but really you'll have learned something practical, something that you can put to use. So that's how I tend to approach kind of learning new technologies. And unlike with code, where you would have had to spend, you know, a year learning Python or something, you know, you can learn these tools really quickly. That's the beauty of it.
I would absolutely agree with the jumping in and trying it out yourself. You know, for Zapier, obviously you can set up a very simple Zap in a matter of minutes and get an overview of how it works, which is great. But we also have Zapier University, like most folks do. We've got great help docs online. The developer platform that I run has got, you know, step-by-step instructions and also code samples that you can use if you're looking to get a little more sophisticated. But I think to try it is probably the best way, because honestly, all these tools are very, they're geared toward you being able to use them very quickly, but you have to just get in there and use them. So find a thing and step through it, and I think you'll find anybody would find great success.
These are great suggestions. Thank you all so much. It's exciting to think about new folks joining through this platform, right? The no code and low code platforms, being able to get into technology and really make their vision come to life using these kind of tools. It's exciting to think about. So I have enjoyed hearing so much from all of you. I do want to open it up to the audience and see if we have any questions that we can ask our speakers to address. So I'm just going to look at chat real quick and see if anything has come through that we could talk about. But folks in the audience, please let us know if there are things that you would like to hear specifically from our speakers today. We have a wealth of knowledge and experience here at your disposal.
And you can feel free to unmute or raise your hands or type it in the chat, right? Edie? Okay, good.
Yeah, that sounds great. Really, any method is fine. I just opened my participants window so that I could see if folks did a hand raising.
I actually have a question.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Daniel. Go ahead.
So for Zapier, can you, for the developer part of it, can we integrate like a private custom software application and use that as our kind of API hub?
You absolutely can. Anything that you build on the developer platform can be private for yourself or invitation only. You can invite as many folks as you'd like to use it, and it still not be publicly listed in the app directory. So you're welcome to use that in whatever scope you want to. A lot of people will have a small user group so that they can test it out and then make it public, but plenty of our integrations stay private the whole time so that people can use either their own internal tools or something that they built specifically for their group.
Awesome, thank you.
That was a great question. Thank you, Daniel. So we've had a suggestion that we could maybe hear like a personal story from each of our speakers about something that they have built or accomplished with a low code or no code solution. We've heard little tidbits here and there, but maybe something that you were really proud of or that you thought you saw as really successful.
I could share one from a customer. So this was a story that somebody named Avni Patel shared at Webflow's No Code conference, which was about a year ago. And I think is also a great resource to learn more about no code. It was sponsored by Webflow, but it really featured a lot of no code tools and was about sort of just the concept and the different apps. And so she is a mom, and she told the story about how she was having trouble finding childcare for her kids, and she had a business idea to come up with an app that made it easier to search caregivers and book caregivers for her children. And she said a quote, I don't remember the exact quote, but she said something like, I'm the person who should be building this, like this is for me and it's my solution and I'm the person who should be building it, but I don't have a tech background, I don't have the money to pay for a developer. And no-code tools, like she shared her whole no-code tech stack, but they enabled her to build her MVP on her own and get that business running. So I just think that that kind of example kind of captures how no-code does empower people who, you know, that quote that she had about she's the one who should be solving that problem, but she couldn't before without no-code tools.
That's a great example. I love to think about folks out there being proactive and having the ability to really make solutions come to life for themselves. That's great. Alan, how about you? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, let's see. There are a lot of different use cases. One customer I talked to recently is out in Boston and runs kind of a company that, well, pre-COVID at least, would help book bands for live shows at local bars and events, and was basically using Airtable to manage that entire business. Anything from, you know, having a CRM of all the different bands and what kind of music and, you know, what types of venues they like, to an intake form to help the bars and venues kind of request performers for a particular night. Had kind of scripts built into Airtable to help do the matching, use some of our kind of page designer features to generate invoices and flyers. So really kind of end to end was able to bring all this together in a way that was hyper customized to his specific business, and with just him and his one business partner was able to scale this to cover pretty much, I think, all of Boston. So I thought that was kind of a really kind of empowering story of what you can do given the right tools without needing to know any code, basically.
That is a very impressive use case. I'd love to hear about that. Lisa, do you have an example for us?
Sure. So, you know, like I said, we've helped a lot of folks, you know, even pre-COVID, but a lot of what is happening now is tailored customer experiences. So you can take somebody through your product by using Zaps to guide them. If they do this, then trigger this thing to happen. If they sign up for this mailing list, then you can send them this email, and do your own sort of automated you know, marketing campaigns and customer outreach that really is impactful to people without putting a lot of burden on you. And that's a great way for businesses to scale up. Like Alan was talking about, it's a great way to, you know, for a 1-person or 2-person show to be able to expand their reach and cover a lot of territory without having to do more work. Personally, one of my favorite Zaps is I'm terrible at remembering the things I've done. And when it comes time to do my performance review documentation for my boss, I have always struggled. So now I've got a Zap set up to whenever we talk about something in Slack, or I get an email or anything that has any sort of like reminder of a thing that I've done, I have a Zap that sends it into a Google Doc for me, so that when it comes time for review time, I open up that doc, I clean it up a little bit, drop it into our performance review tool, and I'm done. And it's a lot better. And it's also kind of nice just to look back and see, oh, hey, yeah, I did things. You know, right now we feel like every day is today, and it's hard to know to differentiate when stuff happens. So it's a nice way of setting up your own little running list of stuff you've gotten done and gotten done well.
That is an amazing example of a really beneficial Zap. Anyone else feel like that's maybe something that should go on their list? That's great. Okay, well, it looks like we have another question here in the chat. Do you see the rise of no-code ever leveling the playing field and compensation between traditional software engineers and the new no-code developers as a profession? So this is interesting, right? This question is really getting at those perceptions and maybe unspoken judgments that are in this technology field. What are your all's thoughts about that?
My like inclination is I hope so, but I'm not confident. I think this might be unrelated, but there's a common misconception that like no code tools will put developers out of a job, which is like quite the opposite. Like developers are still the ones building the no code tools. And also like the get around example, no code tools actually like ideally will allow developers to focus on, you know, better uses of their time and their efforts. Like building a product is a better use of their experience than building a landing page and changing the hero every day. I guess that's irrelevant, it just reminded me. But I think it's a good question because I think still developers are sort of compensation wise and even just kind of almost like reputation in tech are still you know, really highly valued as they should be, but other roles should be as well. I'm not sure that kind of reputation will go away because of no code developers. I do think there will be more and more no code developer positions opening up. Sometimes it's called visual developer, especially at like, at least where I see it the most is in-house marketing teams. I think there's more and more of a need to have an in-house visual developer to be the no code developer on things like their marketing website, just so those resources are dedicated to that. It also still, you know, it still is a different amount of experience and education. A developer is still going to have more depth of knowledge on complex code concepts and different languages that are not always represented by no code right now.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. It's an interesting thing to think about. So we have another question for all of the speakers. Could you please share your design principles and best practices when building a no-code or low-code system? Could you please share some do's and don'ts that you have learned? Alan, why don't we start with you for this one?
Yeah, definitely. It's a good question. I think a few principles, or a couple principles we have at Airtable. One is sort of interoperability, meaning that you know, one of the ways that code is really powerful is you can write functions or little snippets of code that you can then reuse everywhere, and they can all kind of talk to each other in code, and that's a principle that we try to maintain in Airtable as well. So, as an example, you know, fields can reference other fields in Airtable. Tables can kind of link to other tables. Automations, which is kind of, as Lisa was describing, that can also talk to all the other parts of your database. So we try to build these Lego pieces, as we call them, so that they can all stack on top of each other. And that way you don't end up with parts of your product that can't be referenced or used elsewhere. I think another big thing for us is keeping sort of ease of use or kind of having sort of a stepping stone to kind of more advanced usage. So if you want to come in and use it as if it's a spreadsheet, that's something we definitely want to support, because we see that as a way of making these complex database concepts more approachable to people. But as you use it more and more and you start to uncover a need for you know, relational database features, automations, custom apps, scripts, it's all there for you. So kind of walking customers through that journey, depending on what their particular needs are.
Thank you, Alan. And Lisa, what would you say about this? Are there any do's and don'ts that you've learned, or best practices or design principles that you could speak to?
Sure. So I think, you know, since we've started doing shared Zaps and Zap templates, it's a lot easier to get started. Sometimes you're not really sure like what you want the two pieces to do when they work together. So there's a bunch of great examples. So if you're struggling with it, look for the two apps you have, look at the example Zaps and Zap templates that are set up, and pick one that's close and then modify it, or pick that one, see how it goes for a while and then add to it. It's best to think about like what you hope to, like, when I do this, what do I want to have happen? Your trigger and your action are the core points of it. And if you have an idea of what you'd like to see before you start working with the pieces, you'll know if you're getting expected or unexpected results. But the Zap is going to debug it, help you debug itself through each step. It'll go off and grab some sample data from the thing and be like, is this what you were talking about? And you can check every place that you go. So there's a lot of built-in sort of help and guidance there too, if you haven't really mapped out the whole thing. But I think knowing, like, you know, your starting point and your destination are the important parts of that system design, making sure that you know what you're hoping to get at the other end. We have some really cool Zaps that people set up for making a new playlist in Spotify based on what you get on your Discover Friday. And it's super complex. It's lots of steps in there. I'm glad somebody else planned it out for me, because it's got a bunch of places where you can tweak, like, I want no live music, or I like it with a, you know, beats per minute above this. There's lots of qualities in the Spotify API now that you can use to pick music for you. I would have never thought about all of those things. I'm like, sure, build me a playlist. That'd be great. I don't know what I want in there. So I set that up, and it's kind of fun to watch that playlist build itself over time. And so there's a bunch of, we don't all use Zaps for super important stuff, is what I'm saying. There's some fun ones in there too that you can go in and play around with, and then start applying those same principles to business critical, mission critical type situations.
I'm with you, Lisa. I never would have thought about Zaps for Spotify. That's awesome. Very creative. So I would love to hear from Camille actually about this, because the question was really about, like, when you're building a low code or no code system, what design things are you keeping in mind? And that is essentially what Webflow is, right? So I would love if you could address this. And incidentally, there's another question specifically for Webflow about folks wanting to get started using it. So if you are able to keep all of that in your mind, Camille, and go from one to the next, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do my best. Yeah, so I think that best practices and design principles are going to depend on the tool. I guess, like, shameless plug, at the conference, the talk I gave was sort of about this, so I'll link that because it is relevant. It was about kind of best practices of building in Webflow from my experience of doing that at GetAround. Some things to keep in mind are, with Webflow, you can use custom code to do things that you can't natively do in Webflow, to try to minimize your use of that, because it sort of defeats the purpose or gets in the way of the benefits of Webflow, which is that everything you see in the designer is what you publish, and that you don't need to go in and edit code to make edits. To be very careful about your class naming. So just as you would if you were writing code, to come up with like a style guide with classes associated with it, of how you name your classes for text, for containers, how you use combo classes and global classes, which are all just things that are gonna kind of prevent you from accruing a lot of technical debt. If you move too quickly without figuring out the best practices and coming up with your system and your naming conventions, like a few months later, the project is going to become a mess. And again, like, it's just technical debt that you're gonna have to address at some point, and all of that technical debt also just kind of muddies up the project, and again, removes like dampens a lot of the benefits of using Webflow. There's a ton of them, but just for the sake of time, like, those are a few of them, and the talk I gave was sort of about this, so maybe that will be useful to you. For the question about Webflow for solopreneurs and small businesses currently using or considering WordPress, full disclosure, I'm looking at our WordPress landing page. I don't just have all of this in my mind. Kind of some benefits of Webflow over WordPress are that the code that Webflow outputs is nice semantic code that most developers would like to look at, which is not the case with WordPress. There's more design freedom with Webflow because you're not limited to WordPress themes. You can use a template in Webflow, but you can also just design whatever you want to design. SEO is really easily baked into Webflow. Site security is covered. And then a big part of it is the CMS. So Webflow's content management system is sort of like one of the big, things that makes us a competitor to WordPress. And if you're looking to move a WordPress site into Webflow, We have a CSV import that lets you just take all of your CMS items from WordPress and get them into Webflow really easily. And then we sort of lastly, there's actually a lot more, have a plugin called Webflow Pages by Webflow that allows you to design your page in Webflow, but then still host it on WordPress. So if you're working with like clients who still need WordPress to be involved or just can't let go of it, like I think there's a lot of fear of moving away from WordPress, that's a way that you could still get a lot of the benefits from Webflow.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like Webflow has thought about WordPress and their
Yes.
users. Okay, thank you so much, Camille. That was like a double hitter for you. Thank you for that. So we've had a question come in specifically for Lisa. Could you please speak to the security issue? End users are seemingly giving away multiple app permissions to Zapier. It's a great question and something I have wondered about as well.
Absolutely. So we have lots of, there's when you set up your Zap and you go in to add an account, there's a very clear statement of how your account information is used and how we store it. TLDR, we don't. We just make the connection and that's it. It's between you and that third party app. And you've granted permission only to access the parts of the app that you want to have shown. So you're in control of all of those things and we don't store any of that. We are not yet, but we are nearly toward SOC 2 compliance, which would give you a standard against which you could check our security practices as a company from top to bottom.
Thank you,
Hopefully that
Lisa.
answered your question.
This is something that Zapier has probably thought about a lot.
Indeed.
Okay, and I don't want to miss a question that was asked a little while ago, and that is about whether your companies are hiring and what those respective roles might look like.
Yes, very much yes, and all over the place. So, and if you don't see something that immediately, speaks to you, there's also a general application form and you can tell us what you're interested in. We're hiring for all roles all over the world. You can live anywhere you want. If you are currently in the Bay Area, we will also give you $10,000 to delocate from there. So as everybody is taking this COVID time to move around the world, you can do that as well. And don't be discouraged if the first answer is not now. The average Zappian has applied 3 times. And at the last retreat, the table I was sitting at, somebody had applied 6 times before they got the job. I think that's more times than I would ever do, but multiple times is not a problem. So come apply for everything.
Yeah, so like I think when there's sort of interesting other employment opportunities that no code offers. Webflow is also hiring across many teams. Besides jobs like at no code companies, which there's definitely plenty of, there's also, I think I'll just kind of briefly talk about some of those other employment opportunities. So like I've talked about, entrepreneurs can create their own apps and like get their businesses off the ground more easily with no code. Freelance designers, I have a lot of freelance designer friends who have learned Webflow and now can develop websites for their clients as well and are able to charge more for that and bring in a lot more clients because they have that capability all in their own skill set now. And then there's also like the template marketplace for Webflow specifically, where designers who are approved, basically just like have to meet some criteria, can design templates that are then sold in the template marketplace. So there's also sort of interesting like secondary employment opportunities involved, offered by a lot of no-code companies.
Yeah, and just to pile on, Airtable definitely hiring across a ton of different roles. Airtable.com/careers lists them all out, but marketing, engineering, go-to-market, sales, people, and especially got to give a plug for product management. And yeah, actually, I agree with Camille that there's a whole secondary ecosystem that we're trying to build out too, both in terms of consultants and developers. So yeah, exciting space.
Okay, thank you all so much for that. We are coming up on time, but we do have one more question that was specific for Airtable and Zapier. And it was, let me see if I can find it here. how do you compare your platform to other more traditional business process model and annotation management tools? So I'm not sure if we have time to fully answer this, but this is a great topic, and I saw lots of folks had posted their LinkedIn URLs, and so I'm sure that any of our speakers would be happy to field questions after the time through LinkedIn. So thank you so much. This has been a really super fun conversation. I've loved hearing all that our speakers had to share with us today, and I'm going to pass it back to David. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Dee Dee, and Camille, Alan, Lisa, and all the speakers. Thank you so much. Great session today. I learned so much.